Welcome to the Zesty Ginger Podcast. We are Megan and Dr. Alex. We are here for transformation. Yours, ours, and the collective. Personal and professional for practitioners. But not just any transformation. Compassionate transformation. Because between the two of us, we have seemed to have done things the painful way. Let our pitfalls become your stepping stones. We aren't afraid to share our raw and vulnerable truths in order to help you transform your thinking, your body, your heart, and your soul. Combining 15 years of functional medicine with brain-based habit change to lead you to the best life possible in a compassionate way. Compassion, yes, yet plan to roll up your sleeves. Transformation requires your participation. And a quick reminder, this information is not meant to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor, not this doctor, before making changes. Now let's get into the episode. Hello, Dr. Alex here with you today. I hope that you're having a wonderful, wonderful day. This episode is going to be a direct extension and continuation of the previous episode. So if you have not listen to season 16 episode number 5, then go back and do that because you're gonna be lost if you haven't listened to that one yet, because we're essentially picking up at the level of the new problem that we realized was created once we went through that process, right? So today we are going to be talking about how to address and begin to positively impact the lens or the filters that our ways of thinking and believing has us seeing the world through, okay? And one of the ways that we know about those discrepancies in beliefs and thoughts, and by discrepancy, I mean it doesn't align with what your goals are right now, right? There's a discrepancy between what you want and what you're actually experiencing. Those thoughts that come up and the experiences that we have there are what Megan and I guess I started this, but I think we both do it at this point, refer to as mental gremlins, right? Mental gremlins, the definition of them is something that you think, a belief or a thought, and of course the belief is just a thought that you thought a lot, then it's one of those that is not actually accurate for all of who you are. So mental gremlins are liars, essentially. Mental gremlins are inaccuracies of thinking that when you look at yourself through one very specific small keyhole, that mental gremlin checks out. Anytime you look at it, the reason you know it's a mental gremlin and not some sort of truth or some sort of goal or some sort of feedback or piece of information that you're actually going to utilize is that once you start to look at it through different lenses, not only is it not true, does it work out, but it actually doesn't serve you. So what would be an example of that? A mental gremlin would be, I never do anything right. When you're talking about that from a health perspective, but at work or with your job or with how you dress or how good of a cook you are or how good you are at being there for your friends, that wouldn't hold true for. That's just a mental gremlin that's being applied for the health side of things. But it's not rooted in the reality of who you actually are because it's at odds with it. So I hope that makes sense for the definition of the mental gremlin. And today in this podcast episode, we're going to talk about how we argue back with them, right? How do we use the mirrors that we talked about yesterday to then elicit more clarity about what we believe and what we think, and then really begin to consider and have an approach towards saying, is this true for me and do I want to keep thinking it? Is this a mental gremlin that I want to keep getting wet? Or is this, is it time to pop it out, dry it off, and not get it wet again, right? So we are going to talk about that. So before we dig in, though, as usual, let's do a little shout out to FullScript, because this episode is supported by our friends at FullScript. And FullScript is an online formulary that allows practitioners like us to compile and curate supplements at a discounted rate. So we have our full collections over at zestyginger.com/fullscript. And you can see when you log into there that you will see categories of what we have used for ourselves, our families, our loved ones, our friends, our clients that we work with. You can see what all is in the different categories and see how it applies to you. We super love it because when it comes to paying for quality supplements, when places like FullScript exist, we won't ever pay full price again, right? There's no reason to do that when places like FullScript exist. So if you're still paying full price for supplements and stuff, you don't have to anymore, right? You get 15% off automatically, so go check that out. And if you are interested in something being on there, reach out to us because we will consider it. Obviously, if we don't recommend it, we will not do it. But let us know if there's something that you would like to see on there. All right, so we're going to pick back up at the mental gremlins, right? So when we were talking about fragmentation blindness yesterday, we were talking about essentially intentionally and in a purposeful manner gathering information about ourselves so that we can use self-awareness to elevate our perspective of what's going on internally, right? Because we talked about without that information, it's hard to then decide and know what to do about it. So then we talked about how that comes up. Now, the next problem we identified, though, is that a mirror is only as good as your ability to see in it and use it, right? And therefore, when we have a lot of filters in place, that can certainly be a modifier of it. Now, that's not to say that the mirror is actually inaccurate, right? The person that is triggering you is still triggering you, but oftentimes we also have a greater framework of how that person is doing the thing that we already believe about ourselves or that we are doing to ourselves, right? So if we hope to change the mirror, then we have to change. We have to pick up different tuning forks and put the tuning forks we no longer wish to see down, right? So there was a time where Megan and I in business would be like, oh my gosh, we are getting on the phone with people. People are saying our stuff is really helpful, but they're not sure they want to do it because nothing usually works for them. And then we looked at our behavior and we're like, actually, there are times where we don't sign up for things because we think that maybe it won't work for us. And so we were like, actually, why would we create this? We don't like this mirror. We're not going to keep doing it. Things can work for it. There's so many resources and options. It's a matter of us being devoted and dedicated to finding them and just blowing out those mental gremlins that say otherwise, right? So at some point then, you change the projection and we don't hear that anymore. And when we do, it's a very different story. There's other things being presented. There's other mirrors being presented to us, but it is no longer the same. So if you're sitting there as a client or as a coach and you're like, well, why won't my clients work with me? Why won't the clients pay in full? Why won't the clients, make the decision? They're dragging their feet. The mirror is there for you. And if you have the courage to change it, change your state, change the filter, change the reflection, the projection coming back at you becomes a lot more fun and it changes over time, and that's the feedback on how you know it's going. Okay? So when it comes to mental gremlins, the reason that I explained what they were is because inherent in the definition is kind of what to do about them, right? Our job with mental gremlins is to see that if they are inaccuracies discovered when we change the perspective, and the discrepancy that we discover in there is not serving us, then that was the definition, and that also guides us to what we need to do about it, right? How do we begin to actually see the fallacies that the mental gremlins are are being presented to us, right? If I am having a day where I feel not so great about my body, and then I go bathing suit shopping and the mental gremlins just get louder, right? I potentially have done something to get them wet. Now, that's okay. Sometimes we need to do that, but then you're acknowledging, hey, right now, today, this is what it sounds like, but yesterday I felt fine. And yesterday, had I done this, I wouldn't have been upset going bathing suit shopping, right? And so at that point, we really start to notice that if they are not an omnipresent thing, then our job is to poke holes into their arguments when they arise, looking for the opportunity to do so. Because if you try to poke holes and you can't, and you're coming up with the same thing every single time, like that person is just hurting your feelings, right? That event is triggering you. This is not working for you. Well, then it's not a mental gremlin. It's time to go talk to the person, set some boundaries, or change what you're doing, or change the dynamic, or whatever it is. You will then get to go do all of that stuff from a place of clarity, having wrestled with your own mental gremlins. So with mental gremlins, we're talking about poking holes in the story when things don't make sense. So what does that really look like? One of the things that Megan has talked about a lot on the podcast is the 4 questions from Byron Katie, and we even interviewed her. Megan interviewed her on the podcast. So check that out if you haven't listened to it already. But the 4 questions, the first 2 are A, is this thought true? Right? And the second one is, can you absolutely know that it is true with certainty? Right? Because those 2 questions are incredibly powerful, right? If I say I'm a piece of crap to myself while I'm looking to myself in the mirror, if I say, is it true? My mental gremlins could be a little loud at the moment, and I say yes. Like, is it absolutely true? And could I know for absolute certainty that it's true? Well, then I'm a little, most people have to begrudgingly admit, okay, well, maybe not everybody would think I'm a piece of crap. And maybe on a given day, I don't even think I'm a piece of crap. So I suppose when I'm not having this strong charge activation in my emotional body, then I can acknowledge that it is not true, right? So those 2 right there, if all you get from this episode is asking your mental gremlins, when you have a thought that doesn't feel good and you ask yourself if it's true, and then you verify, could I know with absolute certainty that it is true? And any of those are no, then that's your answer. It's so powerful to begin to poke holes in it, right? So then, if this is not true, what other scenarios can I think of? What other interpretations can I create where this is also not true, right? How can I create that? Now, I would shoot for between 3 and 5 scenarios on whatever it is. If you're upset because your friend didn't text you or didn't call when he said he was going to call, right? It's like, well, he did it because he doesn't care about me. So now you're upset, right? And so then, is it true that he didn't call because he was upset about me? You say yes, sure. Can you know with absolute certainty that it's not true? No, I guess I can't. What other things could be going on? Well, he could be trapped under a rock. He could have gotten his mouth shut. He could be missing thumbs. And you start firing it off. These questions then, and the invitation for I'm going to look for other options, are all ways that you will take the legs, you'll dry off the mental gremlins that way. Because once you start poking holes in them, the emotional charge that you feel is then modified. Because if you think, well, my friend could be struggling today a lot and has a whole bunch on his plate, maybe something's wrong with one of his family members and he's dealing with some health issues with them, that begins to feel very different than this person's a jerk and they don't care about me, which of course, if you think that thought, that mental gremlin, the conclusion you draw from it is not good. And if you did draw a good conclusion, it'd be a little weird, right? It would, if that person doesn't like me, unless it's something good like, oh, I don't really care, I'm, not looking for external validation, that's fine. But really, like, if you care about someone and then you realize that something's happening in that relationship, it would be highly unusual for you to just like not care, right? You could get to not caring, but more than likely you do. And that is already present and it's there. So because it is actually acknowledging something, it's very, very useful then, right? So once we begin to create other interpretations, then the next step after creating these options is to say, the next question is, how does that allow me to feel then, thinking these other options, and then taking note of that, right? How does that, so what is the shift? I go from feeling triggered and hurt to maybe I'm concerned about my friend, right? What is the note there? And then the last part of this is, if that were to be true, what is, I'm acknowledging how I feel, what is it that I need to support myself right now? That could look like a good cry. That could look like doing a parasympathetic exercise. That could be calling a friend. That could be talking to the actual friend because you realize, hey, I'm actually worried about them legitimately and I'm going to reach out to them. And now, you transform triggering into care and love and friendship. Yeah. So all of these things then get us on the path, and we always anchor it into action, because once we begin to reconsider these things and begin to reclaim our sovereignty in our emotional body, right? This, instead of someone else, quote, making you feel something, you are reclaiming your emotional experience. As you go through those questions that I just outlined, that's what happens. You think differently, you feel differently. That is a natural extension of how the mental and emotional body work together. So as you begin to create actual authority in your body to say, no one else can make me feel any type of way. And even if they do, I have a strategy and a method for, once again, standing in my power and saying, who do I want to be instead, right? It's very different to be like, well, that friend didn't text me, so I'm not going to text them, and you get into the mutual pettiness, and guess what? And the next thing you know, you're not friends anymore. It's a completely different thing to be like, oh, wow, this is how I feel, but I see my friend, fill in the blank, and this is who I'm proud to be in this, whether you set a boundary, whether you have a conversation, whether you approach them with compassion, maybe you go help them. I'm not making a case for what you do afterwards, but my point is you get to decide that from a different place. And because, again, what is the whole point of this? You want to change the mirror, you show up differently in the mirror. The mirror is just mirroring it back to you, right? So as you begin to focus in on your authority, your autonomy, your capability to feel the way you want to feel about yourself because you're being the person you want to be, that is how we change the mirror. That is how we get clear on some of these lenses and filters that we have in place. So very, very exciting stuff. This is all really powerful work, like I said. I mean, this is true for all of it, right? But the power of transformation is unparalleled. But we are either equipped to handle it and move through it intentionally, or we're going to kind of bumble along. These things took us a really long time. So I'm so happy to be able to sit here now and to begin to walk you through it, because it really shouldn't take anybody else as long as it took us to get here, right? And we say that in lots of different ways, but we truly, truly believe it. Okay, so that is that for the podcast episode. Let's chat about retreats, because I've been continuing to open up slots to discuss retreats. This process that we're talking about, uninstalling beliefs, when we certify leaders and practitioners, coaches, there are other avenues where you can intentionally go in and unprogram, unwire certain beliefs and thoughts and install new ones. Okay? And there are many different avenues to do that through, but it is all under the category of subconscious reprogramming, right? There's consciously you can think of some things, but if your beliefs underneath the surface are always bump against bumping against what you're trying to accomplish, it's frustrating and hard. And so subconscious reprogramming tools are that. So whether it's you or you are a coach, provider, practitioner, teacher, leader of any kind, our 7-day practitioner program is going to be a really good fit for you, because essentially navigating the subconscious mental gremlins and rewiring them, you can move much, much faster. And if you're working with people, you can get them results incredibly fast. So when you use the combination of all the stuff that I'm talking about here and what you can do with someone one-on-one and in groups, well, then it gets really, really fun. Obviously, you can see it, Megan and I living that. So, hopefully we're doing a good job showing it. So what we have coming up, if you would like to chat with me on the phone about any of it, we have a retreat. It's a 1.5 day in January. That one's an intro one, and it will get you started. And then the level 1 is at the end of April and into May, 7-day. And then there is a personal breakthrough in June. If you are not a coach or a practitioner, teacher, or leader of some kind, and you are working on your stuff, your health, your business, whatever it is that you got going on, then the personal retreat may be a better fit. But don't worry about any of that. You just come hop on the phone with me. We'll talk about all the different details and what's going on, and help you make the decision on which one would be a better fit. Alrighty. Have a wonderful day, and I will catch you all next time.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.